Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Classic Comics. So today, going to be live streaming for the next hour or so. Not sure what I'm going to talk about. It's been a pretty uneventful week in terms of news. I kid, of course. So the big hot topic is what's been happening with DC Studios and James Gunn and Peter Safran's new plan for the DCU going forward. What is going on? Are they going to just reboot and wipe the slate clean? Are they going to reboot, but they're going to keep the same actors around? Are they just going to make some changes to movies here and there? Maybe cancel some projects, but keep others? Or is this just not a whole lot of nothing? So I guess we'll just go ahead and dive into this. Now, the furor really kind of started over an article in the Hollywood Reporter. And let me bring that up here. And by the way, I want to thank you all for watching, including those who are going to be watching after this airs on a rewatch. So, Hollywood Reporter on December 7th put this article up. Patty Jenkins' Wonder Woman 3 not moving forward as DC hits turning point. So I've already covered this article. So I'm not going to go over it in any detail here. But basically, what the article was saying was that Wonder Woman 3 has been canceled. They're not doing Wonder Woman 3. And Patty Jenkins apparently is has walked off the project and is not going to do another Wonder Woman movie. And along with that, there were a number of other headlines coming out of this article that Jason Momoa was not going to be Aquaman anymore after the next Aquaman movie. He was going to get recast as Lobo. There's the Wonder or Man of Steel 2 sequel has been canceled. That's not going to happen. And Henry Cavill and Ben Affleck had both filmed cameos for Flash and Aquaman, and those were just going to get cut out of those movies. And basically, the DCEU or Snyderverse or whatever you want to call it, as we've known it, was going to end with Aquaman 2 coming out in about a year on Christmas of next year. And I mean, for what it's worth, I can see why they would do this. I understand why they would do it. I mean, let's face it, this thing has been a bit of a mess from the start, and it's got a lot of baggage attached to it now. And unfortunately, I think that the repeated failures of these films in this franchise have just damaged and tarnished the brand to the point where I think there's just not a lot of goodwill around it with the public. I think that, when DC films come out now, there's no real excitement to it because I think people expect that the movie's not going to be very good. And I think part of that's at least part of the reason why Gunn and Safran may be deciding to just kind of start fresh because maybe it's easier to just move on from this and leave the baggage of it behind. Because let me share another article here, or another page. I've got a list of all the DCEU movies here, and I'm just going to go over them. Let me bring that up. Here we go. Okay. There we go. So this is just a wiki, and it's got a list of the DC Universe movies, or at least the DCEU movies. Now, if we're starting this with Man of Steel, which came out June 14th, 2013. And honestly, you could go back further because that Green Lantern movie with Ryan Reynolds, that was supposed to be like the beginning of a new DC universe on screen. That was supposed to be, that was going to be kind of like their Iron Man. But that movie flopped. And then after that, there was Jonah Hex. Remember Jonah Hex? And that thing flopped. So you could add those two movies into this as well if you want. But we've got Man of Steel, Batman versus Superman, Suicide Squad, Wonder Woman, Justice League, Aquaman, Shazam, Birds of Prey, Wonder Woman 84, and I guess we can count Zack Snyder's Justice League 2, even though that really didn't get a release in theaters. That was just on streaming. Then the Suicide Squad sequel, Black Adam, and then there's also the Joker and the Batman, which are not part of the Snyderverse also. And honestly, out of these movies, how many have been outright hits or outright successes? I mean, I've gone over this list, and honestly, the only one I can think that I think the only ones I think were outright hits when you get right down to it are Aquaman, which made over $1 billion, The Joker, which also made over $1 billion, and Wonder Woman. And Wonder Woman didn't make a billion; it made I think like 780, 770, something like that. And I do think it's worth considering expectations around a movie. If Superman, the expectations for a Superman or a Batman movie aren't going to be the same as for a Wonder Woman movie. Wonder Woman had not had a movie before, so I don't think you can have the same expectations. So I think for a Wonder Woman movie coming out for the first time at 770, that's 770 million. I think that's a success. For Batman Superman, it's kind of middling, I think. But then beyond that, the other movies, we've had a number of movies that have been kind of disappointments, not bombs, not failures, but they did not have the success that the studio was really expecting them to have. Steel and Batman versus Superman, I think both fall into that category. Suicide Squad, I think also falls in that category. I think The Batman, which came out earlier this year, falls into that group as well. And then I think that the rest of them, honestly, I mean, Zack Snyder's Justice League, maybe. I don't know what the numbers were on that one, so I don't know what to think of it. But obviously, I think that if Zack Snyder's Justice League had done well and was seen as a success by the studio, that we would have seen Zack Snyder come back to do more stuff. We probably would have gotten the Ayer cut as well. And the fact that those things didn't happen, I think that kind of tells you that they didn't see that as a success. And then the rest, honestly, most of them are just outright flops. Uh, Justice League was a flop. Shazam was unfortunately, I think, kind of a flop. I hate to say that because I really like Shazam. I think it's one of the best ones they've done. Birds of Prey, that was a flop. Wonder Woman 2 was a flop. The Suicide Squad, that was a flop. And Black Adam, which just came out a couple of months ago, that's apparently a flop. Although Dwayne Johnson is insisting that that thing's a success and it's going to make money. I don't see how. And then we've got 4 more DCEU movies just coming out next year. Shazam, Fury of the Gods, The Flash, Blue Beetle, Aquaman, and The Lost Kingdom. How many of these are going to be hits? Shazam, Fury of the Gods. I mean, again, I'd like to hope so. I would love to see it do well because, again, I like the first one. But I think that thing's got an uphill battle to be a success. The Flash, this thing is a disaster. Just, I mean, this thing was a failure long before it was ever even completed. I don't see any way this movie's going to make money. Blue Beetle, I hope it will be good. I hope it will be successful. But I think the best bet of them is Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom because the first Aquaman was a pretty big hit. But even this movie apparently did not do well in test screenings and has had to undergo a lot of reshoots because of that. Presumably, that is at least in part due to the presence of Amber Heard, who has been a PR nightmare for Warner Brothers. And that's a whole other issue you get into. You've just got so much baggage and so much negativity around the whole DCEU, and this includes the actors. I mean, if you just look at the Justice League actors themselves, uh, I mean, look at the strained relationships that DC Studios has with these people. You've got Cavill now, for whatever reason, DC Studios and Dwayne Johnson spoke out about this, a couple of months back, right before Black Adam was about to open, about how the leadership at Warner Brothers didn't like Cavill and basically didn't want to work with him. And again, why that is, I don't have the inside scoop on that. I don't know. I think part of it was just that whole crew that came in to run the DCEU after Zack Snyder got the boot. Basically Walter Hamada and that bunch. They seem to have wanted to take the DCEU in a more woke direction. And part of that was, let's get rid of white male Superman and Batman and replace them with Supergirl and Batgirl and make our Trinity Supergirl, Batgirl, and Wonder Woman. And it's not even the versions of Supergirl and Batgirl that people like. I mean, it's not even the Kara Zor-El, blonde Supergirl. It's not even Barbara Gordon, really. I mean, for Supergirl, they picked this other version of Supergirl that appeared like once in a dream sequence like 15 years ago in a story that nobody remembers or cares about, really. And I'm pretty sure they did that because that version of Supergirl had dark hair, and so that could justify them casting a Hispanic actress in the role, which is what they did. And then Batgirl was supposed to be Barbara Gordon, but again, they race flipped her, and so she was going to be played by I forget the actress's name, but she was like an Afro Latina or whatever. So, yeah. And then you've got Ben Affleck, and of course, he came in to do Batman and be in Justice League, and then supposedly after that, he was going to get his own trilogy of Batman films to do. But then after Justice League flopped and Zack Snyder was out, Warner Brothers basically yanked the rug out from under him and said, "No, we're not going to do your movie," so that it became, because he was going to like write and direct and produce those movies as well as star in them. They were going to be absolutely his project. But then it changed to, well, he was going to produce them and act in them, but not write or direct. And then he just left the project completely, and then eventually that all got scrapped. And there was a point, if you remember, where Affleck was saying he was done with doing big tentpole franchise movies. He wasn't going to do them anymore. He was done. But then they were able to lure the new regime, I guess Zaslav, when he came in, he was able to lure Cavill and Affleck back to do these cameos in The Flash and Aquaman. But now, according to reports, apparently those are going to get cut, so they're not even going to use any of that stuff. So those guys came back for nothing. And again, Man of Steel is apparently not, or Man of Steel 2 is apparently not going to happen. And then on top of that, you've got the other actors from Justice League who Warner Brothers has what shall we say, a strained relationship with. You've got Ray Fisher, who's basically, ever since, he was quiet for about maybe a year or so, year and a half after Justice League, after until Joss Whedon had that Me Too thing where he got in trouble. And then he started speaking out vocally about Whedon and about the leadership at Warner Brothers, basically calling everybody at Warner Brothers a racist. And I mean, just going on at length on social media about it, becoming quite a PR headache for them. And then you have Ezra Miller, and I mean, that guy's just a total shit show. And he's been breaking into people's houses and assaulting people, and he's been a PR nightmare for them. And on top of all that, you've got Amber Heard, who, of course, we all know what went on with her and Johnny Depp, and that's been another PR headache for them. So I can understand why the folks at Warner Brothers would say, you know what, let's just move on from this, because it's been, honestly, the not a lot of it has been successful, and a lot of it has been unsuccessful and cost them a lot of money, leading up to and including these extensive reshoots they've had to do for some of these movies coming out next year, because of, they want to try and cut out as much of Ezra Miller from The Flash as they can and cut out as much of Amber Heard from Aquaman as they can. So I can understand why they would want to do this, but I also had mixed feelings about this because I felt like, there was some good stuff there, and it would be a shame to just throw it all away. I like Cavill as Superman and would love to see him in a good Superman film. I like Gal Gadot as Wonder Woman. I think most people do. I think most people like her and Cavill in those roles. I liked Affleck as Batman when he wasn't machine gunning people to death. And again, I think most people did. I like Momoa. I mean, I won't say I like Momoa as Aquaman because basically he's just playing Jason Momoa. Let's face it. And I like Margot Robbie as Harley. Although honestly, I'm kind of burnt out on Harley and would be glad to take a break from her. So there's some good stuff there. And it looks like maybe they won't be recasting. Apparently, that's still up in the air, but there is a new article out here. Let me bring this up and we'll go over that, which is kind of the latest things James Gunn has had to say about this. Okay. Uh, James Gunn says DC plan will build upon what has worked and rectify what has not. And this was published in the Hollywood Reporter yesterday, or no, I'm sorry, December 8th, so 2 days ago. James Gunn has responded to a story published in the Hollywood Reporter addressing the future of DC Studios ahead of a presentation next week in which he and partner Peter Safran will share their vision with Warner Brothers Discovery boss David Zaslav. So, as for the story yesterday in the Hollywood Reporter, some of it is true, some of it is half true, some of it is not true, and some of it we haven't decided yet whether it's true or not. Gunn wrote on Twitter on Thursday. Although this first month at DC has been fruitful, building the next 10 years of story takes time, and we're still just beginning. The Hollywood Reporter story published Wednesday reported that Patty Jenkinson's iteration of Wonder Woman 3 would not be moving forward and raised the possibility that actors such as Henry Cavill and Jason Momoa could be done as Superman and Aquaman, respectively, with Momoa perhaps playing a different DC character down the road. Peter, I, Peter and I chose to helm DC Studios knowing we were coming into a fractious environment, both in the stories told and in the audience itself, and there would be an unavoidable transitional period as we moved into telling a cohesive story across film, TV, animation, and gaming, Gunn continued on Twitter. But in the end, the drawbacks of that transitional period were dwarfed by the creative possibilities and the opportunity to build upon what has worked in DC so far and to help rectify what has not. We know we are not going to make every single person happy every step of the way, but we can promise everything we do is done in the service of the story and in the service of the DC characters we know you cherish and we have cherished our whole lives. Gunn, who directed the Suicide Squad for DC and Warner Brothers, as well as created the HBO Max series Peacemaker, began his job as co-chair and co-CEO of DC Studios on November 1st, after Black Adam had been released, I would point out. As for more answers about the future of the DCU, I will sadly have to ask you to wait. We are giving these characters and the stories the time and attention they deserve, and we ourselves will still have a lot more questions to ask and answer. In addition to his duties at DC, Gunn has Marvel Studios' Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 due out in May. He and Safran take over from Walter Hamada, who oversaw DC films since 2018 during another period of transition following the departure of franchise architect Zack Snyder. Warner Brothers has 4 DC films made under the previous regime due out next year: Shazam! Fury of the Gods, Flash, Blue Beetle, Aquaman, and The Lost Kingdom. So, basically what it boils down to is that in that article, it's very much kind of a word salad. He says a lot, but doesn't say anything. He basically says, we're not really sure. yet what we're doing. So I guess some of this is pending his meeting with Zaslav, which again might be taking place next week. I'm skeptical if we'll get any real clear answers on this before the end of this year. Probably won't be until next year. Now, let's talk about Patty Jenkins and her dismissals. So, Patty Jenkins has apparently left Wonder Woman completely and is not going to be doing any more projects. Let me bring that article up here as well. Where? There it is. Okay. Okay, so Patty Jenkins reportedly exited Wonder Woman 3 over script changes. New details regarding the cancellation of Wonder Woman 3 reveal Patty Jenkins opted to walk away due to disagreements with the studio over the script. And again, this was published 2 days ago. So, new details regarding the cancellation of Patty Jenkins's Wonder Woman 3 reveal that Jenkins herself opted to walk away following the disagreements with the studio pertaining to the film's script. The Hollywood Reporter recently broke the news that Wonder Woman 3 was dead in its current form. At the time, the outlet reported that Jenkins had recently submitted her treatment for the Wonder Woman threequel, which she co wrote with Jeff Johns. New DC studio bosses James Gunn and Peter Safran, as well as Warner Brothers Pictures bosses Michael DeLuca and Pamela Abdy, reportedly then informed Jenkins that as it stood, her story for the Wonder Woman 3 did not line up with their new and still evolving plans for the DC universe. According to a new report from Deadline, however, sources familiar with the situation say it was actually Jenkins who decided to depart the project after receiving notes on her treatment from the studio. The outlet says that Jenkins's pitch had character arc problems which rivaled that of Wonder Woman 1984. Notably, while Jenkins's first Wonder Woman film from 2017 was met with widespread critical acclaim, its 2020 sequel, Wonder Woman 1984, had a harder time winning over critics. Deadline reports that one rival studio executive commented on the potential problem of having a filmmaker like Gunn give notes to an established filmmaker like Jenkins, which I think, like, honestly, I think that basically boils down to that, how dare a man give notes to a woman, basically, is what I think that it basically boils down to. That said, the outlet states that DeLuca and Abdi actually had their concerns regarding Jenkins's Wonder Woman 3 treatment even before Gunn and Safran chimed in on the matter. The entire group then provided notes, at which point Jenkins fought back, defending her vision for the film's character arcs. Jenkins was reportedly given the opportunity to pen a new treatment, though decided to walk away instead. While Deadline notes that it was never anyone's intention to be sexist, the outlet acknowledges that the optics of shelving Wonder Woman 3 after already canceling the planned Batgirl movie aren't great for Warner Brothers and DC. However, a new live action Wonder Woman film could still see the light of day at some point. At this stage, the burning question is if franchise star Gal Gadot would want to do another film without Jenkinson's involvement. Interestingly, shortly before news of Wonder Woman 3's cancellation broke, Gadot tweeted, "A few years ago, it was announced that I was going to play Wonder Woman. I've been so grateful for the opportunity to play such an incredible, iconic character. Can't wait to share her next chapter with you." Of course, Wonder Woman 3's cancellation was far from the only revelation to come out of the original THR report. The piece also claims that a sequel to Man of Steel is now in flux, despite previously being in development. Henry Cavill's return as Superman is once again up in the air, despite his recent return in Dwayne Johnson's Black Adam. A sequel to Black Adam itself is unlikely, and Jason Momoa's time as Aquaman is nearing its end, though he could potentially return to the DCU as Lobo. The day after the article was published, Gunn took to Twitter to address DC fans' concerns. And again, it just kind of goes over what I've already stated here. Now, it doesn't get into this here. And honestly, I don't know if it's 100% true or not, but I read, I wish I could remember where I read it, but I read somewhere that the storyline that Patty Jenkins had in mind basically what she and Johns came up with for the third Wonder Woman movie was going to be a story that would have Diana using the Lazarus pit to resurrect Steve Trevor. But then Steve Trevor, when people first come out of the Lazarus pit, they're kind of crazy, right? They tend to be kind of like lunatics. And so I guess he would come out, but he'd be evil. And then the League of Assassins was then going to use him to lead their forces in an attack on Paradise Island in Themyscira for some reason. I mean, that in and of itself, it's an interesting idea. It's a bold idea for a story. But first of all, I'd really need to know what is the purpose of them attacking Paradise Island, because that really doesn't make sense. It really doesn't fit the League of Assassins. They're a League of Assassins. They work in the shadows. They're like ninjas and stuff. They're not a big standing army. They're not an invasion force. So them doing that doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. And as deadly as the League of Assassins are, they're still generally just normal humans, highly trained, but still normal humans. And the Amazons are also highly trained, but they're superhuman. They have superhuman strength and would probably pretty much mop the floor with the League of Assassins if the League of Assassins were to just fight them out in the open on a battlefield or something. And so, I don't know that it would work. And again, you'd need to introduce the Lazarus Pit, which is really more of a Batman piece of lore. That's really more from Batman's mythos than Wonder Woman's. So to introduce that on screen in a Wonder Woman movie instead of in a Batman movie is kind of odd. It's kind of an odd fit. So I don't know. I'm guessing that this was probably the right move. I don't know for sure. I'd need to know more about the script. Now, as far as recasting, there's another article here, and this one basically throws water on the idea that people are getting a recast. Where is this? Here it is. Let me bring this one up. Okay, so DC Studios currently not looking to recast Justice League actors. Following reports about changes to the DC Universe, new updates claim that DC Studios and Warner Brothers Discovery are not looking to recast the Justice League. Following concerning reports about the DC Universe, a new development claims that DC Studios and Warner Brothers Discovery are not looking to recast the Justice League actors. Already, there has been major upheaval for DC movies in 2022, and this week only added more fuel to the fire. A new report recently came out about DC Studios not going forward with Wonder Woman 3 and the potential Man of Steel 2. DC Studios heads James Gunn and Peter Safran are also reportedly not having any further Aquaman movies planned with Jason Momoa. This all comes a month after the two co-CEOs began their roles at DC Studios, which is replacing DC Films. So, I mean, and that's kind of the point of it right there. Okay, so they're not recasting, but they're not going to do more Aquaman movies with Momoa, and he may come back and play Lobo. So, how is that not recasting? I don't. Anyway, in a new report from Deadline, one of their studio insiders said that despite the reports that emerged this week, there were never, quote, any preconceived notions of not continuing with these actors, unquote. Currently, it will boil down to the Flash movie, which recently had its release date moved up, and Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom, which opens in December 2023. The report also added that they have no desire to see Gal Gadot retire as Wonder Woman, despite Wonder Woman 3 reportedly being canceled. Thus far, Gunn and Safran have not commented on Justice League recasting. At the time of publishing, no DCU actor or actors have commented or made a statement about their future with the franchise after 2023. The only possible comment that any have made was Gadot, who shared a thoughtful post on her casting anniversary only a day before the initial DC Studios report broke. Many have taken Gadot's casting anniversary post as a sign that she was trying to give fans a head up about Wonder Woman 3 and the departure of Patty Jenkins, but that has yet to be confirmed. It's unclear what the state of DC Studios is right now, following all the reports over the past few days. DC Studios, which launched on November 1st, and again, that was after Black Adam opened in theaters. TV shows has been working on a 10-year plan for the DCU as Gunn and Safran are overseeing movies, TV shows, games, and animation. The duo are reportedly going to present their DCU Bible next week or sometime early next year, as there have been conflicting updates about when Gunn and Safran are actually pitching their vision to Warner Brothers Discovery CEO David Zaslav. Despite Gunn responding to the DCU reports this week, it remains to be seen which parts are true about the Justice League based franchise. Time will tell what kind of relaunch DC Studios intends to do with the DC Universe because they are clearly making a significant overhaul from the previous regime. It seems highly unlikely that Gunn and Safran will throw out everything the DCU has created over the last 9 years, even though some of the DCU films have struggled. That's putting it mildly. Some have found success both critically and commercially. What is likely going to happen is DC will continue with the universe, but restart their development slate and still have projects that focus on established Justice League cast members. Instead of being Man of Steel 2, Aquaman 3, or Wonder Woman 3, they may be altered and tackled differently as the DCU goes forward and figures out what they are doing with the Justice League universe. So I think the impression this gives me is that basically things really aren't settled yet, and they don't really know for sure what they're doing. And we're probably not going to get any clarity on this until after Gunn and Safran have met with Zaslav, whether it's next week or whenever. But I think a lot of this really it kind of boils down to Black Adam. I think that Black Adam, I mean, let's face it, Black Adam was a flop. I don't think there's any other way to describe it. And I think if that movie had been a bigger success, we might not be having these discussions now. In the lead up to Black Adam being released, Dwayne Johnson, he was hyping the movie a lot. And of course, he was hyping the return of Cavill. Cavill went online shortly after it opened, to promote his return. And there was that cameo that he had in the mid-credit sequence, but unfortunately, it generated a lot of excitement online, but it didn't put butts in seats. That's the plain and simple truth of it. And I think that the failure of that film was kind of the final nail in the coffin for the, DCEU or Snyderverse or whatever you want to call it. And again, when I first heard this, that's kind of what I thought is that they would keep these actors in place, but they would kind of restart the universe around them, so to speak. But then that report came out saying that Momoa's out and maybe going to play Lobo. And then right on the heels of that, all these other stories about, oh, no Superman 2 or no Man of Steel 2, no Wonder Woman 3, all these cameos that Cavill and Affleck did getting axed. And so it gave the impression that this was just going to be a full reboot. So apparently, maybe that's still kind of in the discussion stages and it's not settled yet. Who knows how long it's going to be until we get those answers? I don't know. I do think that, and then of course, there's the whole question of the Batman. Where is Robert Pattinson's Batman going to fit into all this? Are they going to keep him as Batman and have him be part of the same universe as these actors? Or is he going to be his own thing? Will Affleck come back to play Batman? I mean, what? Again, there's just so many questions. It's difficult to know what to think. Only thing I know pretty much for sure is that Cyborg and Ray Fisher and Ezra Miller are not coming back. I think Ray Fisher is not coming back, and Ezra Miller, after that Flash movie, he is done. He is not coming back. Those I could pretty much say with certainty. And wow, that Flash movie. I mean, what a mess. I mean, that thing has been a slow motion train wreck pretty much ever since they first announced it. Because they announced, of course, this whole slate of movies after Justice League, or maybe even before Justice League. And I don't remember the exact date, but originally Flash was supposed to come out like a couple of years after Justice League, like maybe 2 years, something like that. And it was going to be an origin story. But then Justice League came out and it flopped. And then became, well, no, it's going to be like a Flashpoint thing, and they're going to reboot the universe around it. Okay. and then it got pushed back, and then it got pushed back again, and they got a different director, and it got pushed back again, and then there was another director, and they had rewrites, and they pushed it back again. I mean, I don't even know how many times that movie's been pushed back. And now I think it may still be some kind of a reboot, but now they're actually maybe gonna just reboot Ezra Miller right out of the role because he's just such a a PR nightmare for them. And of course, that Cyborg movie never happened. I didn't really think that would, even when they announced it. I like Cyborg, but I really didn't see him getting his own movie. Um, I I really do hope they keep these actors. I mean, I think they're good in these roles, and I would like to see more of them myself. I think there's potential there, but as I've said before, I think there's just been so many false starts, so many disappointments, so many canceled projects, and so many movies that have just not met expectations that it's really Warner Brothers is fighting an uphill battle to generate any excitement around these characters anymore. And part of the problem is that there are so many people who are, they want the Snyderverse back, and they're very loud and very vocal, and they're not going to be happy unless basically Zack Snyder comes back to do another Justice League film. So there's that whole wrinkle to it as well. And I think that bringing Cavill back, again, him announcing that online, that's really what got me kind of invested and made me think, oh, wow, this is really happening. Because when he made those announcements online, I mean, I bought in. I thought that, oh, wow, he's really coming back now. Because I didn't think that was going to happen. And of course, Dwayne Johnson making all those announcements fed into that as well. And I think that's, as I said, I think the failure of Black Adam is kind of what has led us to where we are right here. Dwayne Johnson really wanted, I think, to kind of make himself the cornerstone of the DCEU. He wanted Black Adam to be kind of the Iron Man of the DCEU, kind of this anti-hero. And yeah, I mean, I didn't think that was ever really gonna work, but I gotta admit, even I was a little disappointed at how poorly Black Adam did, because it's not a bad movie. It's a solid film, in my opinion, and I enjoyed it, but, uh, Black Adam's just not that popular a character, and I think it does show that Dwayne Johnson doesn't really have quite the box office clout that maybe people thought he had. He's only really had a handful of films that have been big hits. He's got those Jumanji films, which again are kind of building on an already pre-existing IP, and that's kind of an ensemble thing. And then he had one of those movies, was it Skyscraper, or what was the other? There was Skyscraper, and there was another one. Uh, San Andreas was the one about the earthquake, whichever. I think that one may have done well, but that's kind of it. Like he was in that Jungle Cruise movie out a year or two ago, and that thing was a big flop. So I don't think he's got quite the box office clout that maybe people thought he had and that he thought he had. And then as for Gal Gadot, I think really, I mean, everyone likes her in that role. I certainly do. And I hope that she will come back and play that role again. Momoa, again, the word is that he may get recast as Lobo. I mean, I'm not opposed to that. I always thought he should be Lobo. I think that's what most fans thought, is that he'd be really better for that role than for Aquaman. And I think he just kind of got cast as Aquaman because coming off of Game of Thrones, he was kind of like a hot name at the time, and Zack Snyder liked him and cast him as Aquaman, even though he's really doesn't fit the character. And I mean, Affleck, who knows? If I were him, like I said, he'd already said he was done with these tentpole films before. So I was surprised to hear that he'd come back to do a cameo. And apparently, the reason they brought him back to do a cameo is so they could replace him in The Flash, or rather replace Michael Keaton's Batman in The Flash, because they're not going to go with Michael Keaton going forward. Because I guess the plan had been for him to do The Flash and that Batgirl movie, and then maybe he was going to do a Batman Beyond thing somewhere down the line, possibly. And apparently, that's all been scrapped. So you just again, the plans seem to change and shift so constantly, As I've said before, it's been almost from the jump, from the release of Man of Steel, it's been one step forward and one step back with DC on film and with Warner Brothers. And it's just seemed like they never know what they're doing. Now, hopefully, they're getting their ducks in a row. This whole idea that they're going to have a more Marvel style presentation where the films and the TV shows and the cartoons and everything are all basically a single universe, a single unified universe. I mean, I'm not opposed to that. I do think that can get overdone a bit. I think that certainly having the films be unified, I think, is a good thing. I don't know that it's great to have, you've got the sort of DCEU extended universe thing with all the Zack Snyder characters. Then you've got the Joker, who's off in his own separate universe doing his thing, and then the Batman, who's off in his own little timeline doing his thing. And I do think it's confusing. But I don't know if you necessarily have to have all the streaming shows and all the cartoons and all the games, especially all in this same universe. I mean, honestly, I think part of the issue with Disney right now is that they're just pumping out so much crap. And a big part of it is those streaming shows. It's just an endless torrent of them, and most of them aren't even very good. And it really, again, I don't have any streaming services. Well, I have Amazon, but I don't have Disney Plus. Let me put it that way. So I really, for the most part, haven't watched those streaming shows, but I've watched bits of them on YouTube, and I've certainly heard plenty, and it's pretty much all bad. I don't really see this stuff ever from Disney being good for a few years now. And I personally don't really need the DCEU or whatever they're going to call it going forward, taking that route where they've got this endless stream of, well, streaming that's connected to the movies. Because frankly, I think I would get tired of it after a while. And I'm in the tank for this stuff. I mean, I want to love it. Oh, okay. So I've kind of said my piece about that. I'll go ahead and round up here. We'll do a little bit of Super Family blog again, and then I'll go ahead and wrap up this stream. Let me bring that up right quick. Here we go. And again, this is a website that I found about a decade ago, and this is uh, produced by a guy. He does basically fake covers for comics that never really happened. Team ups that, as his blog says, team ups that never happened but should have. And he photoshops. Generally, it's Marvel and DC characters together, but sometimes there are other characters as well. And this is where I left off last time. Brave and the Bold, Batman and Kazar, who is, of course, a Marvel sort of version of Tarzan. So let's go ahead and move on here. Batman and Kid Flash. And this is one of the weaker ones. I mean, this cover is kind of not a whole lot to it. Basically, just taking what is, I'm guessing, a Batman cover and sticking Kid Flash into it. It's not very interesting, not very clever. Okay, now this one I love. Okay, so Brave and the Bold, Batman and the greatest band in the land, Kiss. The team up you never knew you needed. And I love this one because I know this cover. So this cover here is to a oversized Treasury edition that came out back in the mid 70s, back when I first was beginning to read comics. And it was a Treasury edition that collected a lot of old stories of Batman's encounters with some of his top villains. And the original cover, obviously, Kiss wasn't in these pictures. Instead, it was like the Joker, Catwoman, Penguin, and I think the Riddler was the other one. And it had stories with them, and I think also Scarecrow and maybe a couple of others. And I think this is actually a Neil Adams Batman right here. Yeah, I love that one. Then what have we got next? So we got Batman and Kitty Pryde. Obviously, Kitty Pryde, the Batman character or Marvel character. And this is, of course, the Batman in the foreground, and this right here, this blade, are from a Batman cover. I don't recognize it right off. And the background with Kitty and these ninjas and whatnot, that's from another cover. Again, I'm not sure what issue that is, but it actually makes for an interesting team up because Kitty in the Marvel Comics has had some martial arts training alongside Wolverine. Back in the 80s, there was a Wolverine and Kitty Pride miniseries actually, where Kitty wound up getting some ninja training and becoming kind of a badass. And I'm guessing that the story that this came from kind of was playing off of that, right? Batman and Machine Man. And again, I don't recognize this cover right off. With this little extra, the Secret Six Plunder in the Pentagon. I'm guessing that this is from maybe from a Detective Comics because Detective Comics often had backup stories like this one. So this is probably a Detective Comics cover. And then the guy, he photoshopped Machine Man into the cover as well. That's an interesting team up. Batman and Madman. And this would make for an interesting team up. And obviously, again, I'm not sure what issue this is from. Let me enlarge this. Let's see. Yeah, I don't remember. I recognize this Batman panel, these Batman panels from somewhere, but I don't remember specifically. And then this is, I guess, kind of Michael Allred Madman here in the foreground. All right, Batman and Green Lantern, the Golden Age Green Lantern. And I actually kind of like this. As the caption says, Alan Scott was Gotham City's first champion. And he was, uh, Alan Scott was Green Lantern in Gotham City in the Golden Age. And so, with current continuity, he actually was a superhero in Gotham before Batman was. So it kind of it when you think about it, it's puzzling that these two have never really crossed paths more often and had more team ups together. It would make sense. And again, I'm pretty sure that's a Neil Adams Batman there. I'm not sure where this Alan Scott comes from though. Uh, okay. Batman and Aunt May. That's an interesting interesting choice. Alfred's Affair. Take a last look, Alfred, then seal up the Batcave forever. So I guess Alfred had an affair with Aunt May and showed her the Batcave, and Batman's gotten pissed and decided he's going to rage quit his Bat. Uh, okay, next, Batman and Bucky. Okay, an interesting one. Batman working with a different sidekick, and obviously this cover, it kind of emulates the original cover of Robin because in the original cover for Robin, it's Robin who's busting through this whatever you call it here, this I don't even know what the word for it would be, instead of Bucky. And obviously they just and I know there is a Captain America cover. It's not, it's not from the Golden Age. It's like a modern cover that kind of emulated this original Batman cover. So it was pretty easy for the creator to just take that Bucky and Photoshop him into this cover himself. All right. So then, okay, and this is an interesting one. Batman and Magnus Robot Fighter. And of course, Batman, or rather, Magnus Robot Fighter, he's a character from the Charlton comics of the 60s and early 70s. And Magnus is a character who existed in this kind of distant future where basically the world's been invaded by robots. And he has super strength and he sort of fights these robots hand to hand, breaking them up. He's not a DC character. He's a Charlton, although he was optioned. His license was picked up for a while by Valiant Comics back in the 90s, and he was a Valiant character for several years. Those were some good comics. I was a fan of them. But here we've got him fighting this. Batman robot. I don't know where this Batman robot comes from, but that's interesting. Having those two pair up would be interesting. I wonder how they would get Magnus from the future into the modern day. Okay, now here's an interesting one: Batman and Man Thing, and it'd be interesting to see what kind of a team up would result between the two of them. I would imagine now in DC Comics there is Slaughter Swamp, which exists outside of Gotham City, which is where Solomon Grundy, that's where he sort of originated from. His origin took place there. So you could maybe set Man Thing in Slaughter Swamp and have him there. Maybe he could have some sort of connection to Grundy in some way. That would be interesting. Okay, and then Batman and Captain Marvel. And of course, in this case, it is the Marvel version of Captain Marvel, the Kree warrior Marvel, not the Shazam character or the modern Carol Danvers version. Now, I know this cover. This is from actually a cover of Brave and the Bold. But in the actual issue, it's not Batman and Captain Marvel, it's Batman and Adam Strange, and it's Adam Strange who's lying here dead in the foreground, not Captain Marvel. I don't know where the Marvel, what specific cover of his book that comes from. I can't remember, but it does look like it's a Starlin Captain Marvel. So during his run on the book, and this is actually Alana, Adam Strange's wife, back here. Okay, Batman and Mary Marvel. Okay, that's an interesting one. Um, and this is a good Jim Aparo Batman. I don't recognize where this Mary Marvel is from. I think this is from one of their 1970s issues, but I can't remember the specific cover. But it's a fun look, and I'm sure this would be a fun team up. Okay, Batman and G.I. Joe. Now, this could be really cool. Batman and G.I. Joe, Snake Eyes and Storm Shadow have joined forces to take down their mutual enemy, Bruce Wayne. Um, I'm trying to remember. This is from a cover of G.I. Joe, obviously, but I can't remember the specific issue. And I can't remember who was originally here in the center. And I don't remember what issue of Batman this cover comes from, but this would be really cool. Seeing Batman fight Snake Eyes and Storm Shadow would be pretty cool. Batman and Marvel Zombies. Personally, I've never been a big fan of the whole Marvel Zombies thing. Or more recently, that what do they call it? DC Deceased, like the Deceased books, which is basically DC Zombies. I've never really read them and never really cared for them. But it looks like it could be interesting. I don't remember what cover this Batman zombified Batman is from, though. Um, okay, so this is an interesting one. Batman and Lost, the TV show. So I guess this is supposed to be what they found inside the hatch. they they go in the hatch and find Batman hanging out reading Dharma Initiative books, drinking Dharma Initiative beer, eating Dharma Initiative peanut butter. Um, yeah, what do you say? I mean, honestly, this makes no sense. And then the final one for this go round, Batman and Mephisto. And that looks, I can't remember exactly the cover this Mephisto comes from, but I vaguely remember this Batman image here of him fighting these demons. I believe there was some evil sorcerer he was fighting that conjured these creatures up to fight him. But I don't remember where the Mephisto came in. So that would be interesting to see. DC, Marvel has like a number of basically devil characters. Mephisto is the most well known of them, but there's him. There's also Satanish, and there's like at least one or two others. I remember when I was a kid, I had an issue of the Defenders where like Mephisto and like four of these devil characters all got together to fight the Defenders, and they transformed the whole planet into this hellscape, and the Defenders had to defeat them. But DC really generally hasn't done that so much. Now they do have in the Vertigo line, of course, they had actually Lucifer himself. I believe the Sandman had some dealings with him, and Constantine had dealings with Lucifer. And then they also introduced that character, Neron, during that Underworld Unleashed storyline in the 90s. He was also a kind of devil character. But they haven't gone to that well as much as Marvel has. Anyway, that's the last one for that month. So I'll go ahead and stop that there. And it's been getting close to an hour here. So I'm probably going to go ahead and wrap this up. And I want to thank those who tuned in to watch and those who tune in to watch afterwards on a rewatch. And once again, thanks for watching. And I will see you next time.